I didn't cry when I saw the photograph. I want to be clear about that, because everyone who has heard pieces of this story keeps asking me the same thing. They ask if I broke down. They ask if I called somebody. They ask if I poured myself a drink. The answer to all of it is no. I sat at my kitchen table at 6:43 in the morning with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier, and I looked at my phone, and I felt something inside me harden into a shape I had not felt since my wife passed in 2017. It was not sadness. It was not even anger. Not yet. It was the kind of cold focus a man gets when he realizes the ground he has been standing on for 31 years was never solid the way he thought it was. My name doesn't matter much for the telling. What matters is that I am 68 years old. I live just outside Asheville, North Carolina. And for 34 years, I ran a regional logistics company that I built out of a single rented warehouse in Greensboro. I sold most of it 5 years ago. I kept enough that I never have to think about money again, but I have never owned a luxury watch. I drive a 2014 Ford pickup, and I buy my shirts at the same place I have been buying them since the Reagan administration. My late wife used to tease me about it. She said I dressed like a man who was hiding from the IRS even when I had nothing to hide. I told her that was the point. Wealth that announces itself is just bait for people who want to take it from you. We had one child, a son. I'm going to call him my boy when I tell this. Because even now, after everything, I cannot bring myself to say his name out loud the way you would say a stranger's. He turned 31 this past September. He has a degree in business administration from a school I paid every dollar for. He has lived for the last 7 years in a 4-bedroom craftsman house on a quiet street in Black Mountain that I bought outright in 2018 and put in a revocable trust with him as the listed occupant. Not the owner. The occupant. The trust pays the property taxes. The trust pays the insurance. He has never paid a mortgage in his life because there was no mortgage to pay. I made sure of that the day I bought it. The photograph went up on a Sunday morning. I know because I happened to open the social media app on my phone while the coffee was brewing. I do not use it much. I check it maybe twice a week to see pictures my niece posts of her kids in Wilmington. But that morning, the algorithm decided to show me my own son's face. And there he was, in a navy suit I'd never seen before, standing in front of an arch made of white roses, with his arm around a young woman in a wedding dress, and standing on either side of them were her parents, both of them beaming like they had just won the lottery. The caption underneath read, "With the family that has always been there for me," in the lowercase casual style young people use now, with 3 small heart emojis at the end. I read it twice. I read it 3 times. I scrolled to the next picture in the post, and there were 47 of them. 47. The ceremony, the reception, the cake cutting, the first dance. Timestamps on some of them. The wedding had taken place the previous afternoon at a vineyard outside Hendersonville, about 50 miles from where I sat looking at my phone. I had been at home that afternoon. I remember exactly what I had been doing. I had been replacing a section of rotted board on my back deck. I had a sandwich at 1 o'clock. I watched part of a college football game in the evening. My boy got married 45 minutes from my front door, and I had been eating a turkey sandwich. I did not call him. I did not message him. I did not call any of the relatives who almost certainly knew. I sat with the phone face down on the table, and I drank the cold coffee, and I watched the light come up over the ridge behind my house. And I thought about 100 different things, and most of them were not about the wedding at all. I thought about my wife and the night our boy was born at Mission Hospital, and how she held him against her chest and said, "This one, we are going to do right by this one." I thought about the bicycle I taught him to ride in the Walmart parking lot in 1998, because our driveway had too steep a grade. I thought about the year he was 16 and crashed my truck into a fence post, and I told him we would not tell his mother, and we never did. I thought about the day I handed him the keys to the house in Black Mountain, and watched him walk through the rooms with his hand on the wall, like he was a man taking inventory of a kingdom. And then I thought about that caption. The family that has always been there for me. By 8 o'clock that Sunday morning, I had made my decisions. All of them. I did not sleep on it. I did not pray on it. I did not call my brother in Charleston and ask him what he thought I should do, the way I might have done about something smaller. I knew that if I let it sit overnight, I would soften. And if I softened then, I would call my boy, and there would be tears and apologies and explanations. And the explanations would be reasonable, and the apologies would sound sincere. And by Tuesday, I would have agreed to forgive something that I had not yet finished understanding. I have made that mistake before. I made it with my own father in 1979, and I paid for it for the next 15 years until he died, still owing me the apology he had promised. I was not going to make it again. The next morning, Monday, at exactly 9 o'clock, I called my attorney. I have used the same firm in Asheville since 1991. The man who handles my personal affairs is a partner there now, a steady fellow about 10 years younger than me. I told him what I had seen. I told him in 3 sentences. He did not ask questions. He has been doing this long enough to know when a client is not in the mood for soft conversation. I told him I wanted the house in Black Mountain listed for sale by the end of the week. I told him I wanted the trust amended so that my boy was no longer the listed occupant of any property held by it. I told him I wanted a meeting on Friday with him and my financial advisor at his offices. And I wanted my son to be sent a certified letter that morning instructing him to attend, with no other context. He read it back to me. He asked if I was sure. I said I was sure. He said he would have everything ready. I did not contact my son for the next 4 days. I did not respond to the 2 text messages he sent me on Tuesday afternoon, the first one saying just, "Hey Dad, got a sec," and the second one an hour later saying, "Hope everything is okay. Love you." I read both of them. I deleted neither of them. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after the second one, and I did not write back. On Wednesday morning, the realtor I had hired through my attorney went to the house in Black Mountain to do the listing photographs. My son was at work. He works as a project manager at a marketing firm in downtown Asheville. He works there because 8 years ago, when he graduated, I made some calls and got him an interview. He thinks he got the job on his own. I have never told him otherwise. The realtor was in and out in 2 hours. The listing went live on Thursday at noon at a price of $765,000. I priced it to move. I had 3 offers above asking. By Thursday evening, I accepted one of them, all cash, 30-day close, no contingencies, on Friday morning at 8:15. My son arrived at my attorney's office at 10 o'clock on Friday. I know because I was already there, sitting in a chair against the wall in the conference room when he walked in. He had brought his new wife with him. She was wearing a pale blue dress and a small gold cross around her neck. She looked terrified. He looked confused. Behind them came her father and her mother, neither of whom had been invited, both of whom walked in like they were entering a board meeting they intended to chair. Her father was a tall man in his early 60s with the kind of haircut you get at a barber shop that charges you $80 and calls it grooming. He extended his hand to me as if we were business associates meeting for the first time. I did not take it. My son said, "Dad, what is going on? Why are we here? Who are these people?" He gestured at my attorney and my financial advisor. I told him to sit down. I told all 4 of them to sit down. They did. I've learned over the years that when you give a clear instruction in a calm voice, most people obey it without thinking, and by the time they think to push back, they are already in the chair. I let the silence sit for a moment. My attorney had a folder in front of him. He did not open it. I said to my son, I saw the pictures. His face changed in 3 stages. First confusion, then recognition, then the look of the man who has been caught and is calculating which lie will hurt least. He started to speak, and I held up my hand. I said, "You do not need to explain anything to me right now. I am not here for an explanation. I am here to tell you what is going to happen, and after I am done telling you, you may ask questions, and I will answer the ones I feel like answering." His new wife reached for his hand under the table. His new father-in-law cleared his throat and started to say something about misunderstandings and family communication. I turned my head toward him slowly, and I looked at him in a way that I learned from my own father, who was not a kind man, but who knew how to end a conversation with a look. The man closed his mouth. I said, "The house in Black Mountain has been sold. The closing is in 26 days. You have until that closing to remove your personal belongings from the property. Anything left behind on the morning of the closing will be donated or disposed of at the discretion of the new owners." He stared at me. He said, "You can't do that. The house is mine." And here's the moment. This is the moment I have replayed in my head 100 times since that Friday. This is the moment that I think about when I am alone at night and the wind is moving through the pines outside my bedroom window. Because in that single sentence, my boy told me everything I had ever needed to know about how he saw me, and how he saw himself, and how he saw the 7 years he had spent living rent-free in a house I had bought for him out of love and pride, and the simple fatherly hope that he would build a life inside it. I said, "Your name is not on the deed. Your name has never been on the deed. The deed is held by the trust. I am the trustee. I bought that house in 2018 with a wire transfer from my own personal account. I have paid every property tax bill, every insurance premium, every assessment from the Homeowners Association, every repair bill, every roof replacement, every furnace inspection for 7 years. You have lived in that house as my guest. As of Thursday at noon, I have decided you are no longer my guest." He said nothing. His mouth was open. His new wife was crying without making a sound. Her parents were sitting very still. The mother had gone the color of skim milk. The father was looking at my financial advisor in the way that a drowning man looks at a piece of driftwood. I said, "That is not all." I told him about the trust. The full trust. The one his mother and I had set up in 1996 when he was a small boy, and that I had funded in stages over the next 2 decades. The one he believed contained somewhere around $400,000, which was the figure I had told him when he was 25 and had asked me directly. That figure had been true at the time, in the same way that a single tree is technically a forest. The actual trust contained, as of that Friday morning, $11,200,000 in diversified holdings. The total estate, including the company shares I still held and the real estate I owned outright in 3 states, was just over $22 million. He had not known any of this. His mother and I had agreed before she died that he would not be told until he was 35. We had agreed on this for reasons that had seemed wise at the time, and that I now believe were the wisest decisions we ever made as parents. I told him these numbers in the calm voice of a man reading the weather report. I watched his face. I watched her father's face. The father-in-law had not known either. He had not known the size. I could see in his eyes the rapid recalibration of every assumption he had made about who I was and what his daughter had married into. He had taken me, I am certain, for a comfortable retiree of moderate means. He had pitied me, perhaps, the rumpled old widower in the second-hand truck. The pity drained out of his face like water out of a cracked basin. I said, "None of that money is going to my son. Not now, and not when I am gone." As of yesterday afternoon, the trust has been amended. The beneficiaries are now a charitable foundation in my late wife's name, 2 scholarships at the community college where she taught nursing for 11 years, and a fund for veterans of the Carolinas who need help with home repairs. None of you sitting at this table will receive $1. My boy made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a man makes when something inside him has come loose and is rolling around in a place it should not be. His wife was crying harder now. The father-in-law started to speak, and I held up my hand again. I said, "You are going to want to be careful with what comes out of your mouth in the next 60 seconds, because anything that sounds like a threat or a demand is going to be treated as one. And I have a recording device on the table in front of me, and an attorney sitting next to me will make a note of every word." The father-in-law closed his mouth. My boy said, "Dad, please, just listen. Let me explain." I said, "You have 10 minutes. Use them carefully." He used them poorly. He started by telling me that he had wanted to invite me. He had wanted to. He had told his bride that he wanted to. But there had been a misunderstanding. A scheduling thing. They had planned a small ceremony. Very small. Only immediate family. And they had assumed I would want a separate event. Something more in line with my preferences. Something quieter. And they had been planning to call me about it after they got back from the honeymoon. The honeymoon, by the way, was in Tuscany. He told me about Tuscany. He told me the name of the villa. He told me the name of the vineyard they had toured the previous Tuesday. I do not know why he told me about the vineyard. I think he had lost the thread of his own argument and was reaching for any detail that might soften me by demonstrating his happiness. I let him talk. When he was finished, I asked him a single question. I asked him whose idea the caption had been. The caption on the photograph, the one about the family that had always been there for him. He could not answer. His wife answered for him. She said it was hers. She said she had written it without thinking. She said she was so sorry. She said she had not meant me. She had meant her own parents, who had been very supportive of the engagement, and she had not realized how it would read to me. She was crying through all of this, and I will tell you something honestly because I want this story to be honest. I believed her. I believed that she had not meant it as a knife. I have raised one child in this world, and I have known many young women in my life, and I could see in her face that she was not a calculating person. She was a young woman who had married a man whose family situation she did not fully understand, and she had written 6 words that meant one thing in her head and another thing in mine. But I also knew, and this is the part that mattered, that my son had read the caption before the post went up. He had to have. He was tagged in it. He had every chance to ask her to change a single word. Her parents had supported him. He could have written. Her family welcomed me. He could have written any of 100 phrases. Instead, he had let it stand. He had let it stand because in some small private chamber of his heart, he agreed with it. He had decided, somewhere along the line, that the family who had thrown him a wedding was more his family than the man who had bought him a house. I told him this. I told him this slowly and clearly and without raising my voice. I told him that the caption was not the wound. The caption was only the place where the wound had become visible. The wound had been growing for years, in the gradual coolness of his phone calls, in the holidays he had begun to spend at her parents' lake house in Lake Lure, instead of at my kitchen table, in the way he had stopped asking my opinion on anything that mattered. I had told myself those things were normal. Sons grow up. Sons build their own lives. Sons stop needing their fathers, and that is how it is supposed to work. I had told myself that for 3 years, and I had been wrong. Because what had happened was not him growing up. What had happened was him being slowly transplanted, like a seedling lifted out of one pot and lowered into another. And the new gardeners had been very patient and very kind. And now the tree had taken root in their soil. And when they had asked him to come to a wedding without his old gardener, he had not even hesitated. He started to cry. A grown man, 31 years old, sitting in a leather chair in a law office in Asheville, crying. I did not feel triumphant. I want to make that clear. I felt nothing. The cold I had felt on Sunday morning was still inside me, and it was not interested in his tears. I said, "You have 2 months. Until the closing on the house, plus 30 days. After that, I do not want to hear from you. I am not telling you this is forever. I am telling you this is for now. You will not call me. You will not text me. You will not send your wife or your in-laws or any cousin or aunt as an emissary. If you violate any of these conditions, the period will be extended. After the 2 months, I will decide whether to make contact. The decision will be mine. You may not appeal it. You may not negotiate it, and you may not hurry it." He said, "Dad." He said it 3 times. "Dad, Dad, Dad," as if the word itself were a key that might open something. It was not. The father-in-law tried one more time. He said, "Surely we can come to some kind of arrangement. Our daughter and her husband need somewhere to live. Surely you don't intend to put them out on the street. We are reasonable people. We are willing to participate in a solution." I looked at him. I said, "I understand from my son that you are a successful man. I understand you offered, in fact, to write a check for the house yourselves when you heard it was being sold. $750,000, was that the figure?" My son had mentioned it to my attorney earlier in the week. In a panicked phone call my attorney had now returned. I let the number sit in the air. It had impressed my son. I could see in his face that it had impressed him very much. To him, it had been proof that his new family had come to his rescue, that they had the means and the will to step in where his father had failed him. I said, "That is a generous gesture. I admire it. If you have $750,000 in cash that you are willing to deploy on behalf of your daughter and her husband, then your daughter and her husband have nowhere to be on the street. You have a daughter, she has a husband. You are wealthy enough, by your own demonstration, to write a check for $750,000 on 24 hours' notice. Buy them a house. Buy them an apartment. Buy them a tent in your backyard. The solution to their housing problem is sitting on the same side of this table that they are sitting on. It is not my problem. It stopped being my problem at 6:43 in the morning on Sunday." The father-in-law's face went a color I had not seen on a human being in some time. He had walked into the room intending to be magnanimous. He had walked in intending to play the gracious benefactor who would smooth over the misunderstanding and emerge looking like the better man. I had taken his line and given it back to him sharpened on the other end. He did not respond. He could not. There was no response that did not either commit him to spending the $750,000 he had offered, or expose him as a man who had been bluffing. My boy looked at his father-in-law. He looked at him with a particular expression that I had not seen on his face since he was about 14 years old, and it had been a long time since I had thought about that expression. But I recognized it instantly. It was the expression of a child realizing that an adult he had trusted was not, in fact, going to fix the situation. It was the look he had worn when his mother had told him she was sick, and his eyes had gone to me, looking for the version of the news where I would say it was a mistake. I had not been able to give him that version then. His new father-in-law was not going to give him a check now. I stood up. I said, "My attorney has paperwork for you to sign. Sign it or don't sign it. That is your choice. If you sign it, the closing process is simpler. If you don't sign it, my attorney will handle it the longer way. But the result is the same. Either way, the house will be empty by the date stated. I am leaving now. Do not follow me out." I left. I drove home. I made myself a sandwich. I sat on my back deck, where the new boards I had laid the previous Sunday were still raw and lighter than the old ones, and I watched a hawk circle over the meadow behind my house, and I felt, for the first time in 5 days, something move in my chest that was not the cold. For 2 months, I did not hear from him. Almost. He sent me one letter, on paper, in an envelope with a stamp. It arrived in my mailbox 6 weeks after the meeting in the law office. I almost did not open it. I held it for a long time at the kitchen counter, and I considered putting it in the wood stove unopened. But I am 68 years old, and I have learned that there are some things you have to read, even when you do not want to, because if you do not read them, you will spend the rest of your life imagining what they said, and the imagined version will be worse than the real one. The letter was 4 pages long. It was written in his handwriting, which I had not seen since he was in college, because everything between us for the last decade had been digital. He apologized. He apologized for the wedding. He apologized for the caption. He apologized for the years of distance that had preceded both. The holidays he had skipped, the phone calls he had not returned, the slow and unconscious way he had begun to take me for granted. He told me he had moved out of the Black Mountain house on the date specified. He told me he and his wife were renting a 1-bedroom apartment in West Asheville. He told me he had taken a second job, in the evenings, doing freight work at a warehouse off Patton Avenue, because the marketing salary alone was not enough to cover both rent and his student loans, which he had not realized I had been quietly paying down for him out of a separate account for the last 3 years. He told me he had not known about the loan payments until his mother-in-law had asked him why his loan balance was so low for someone who had never made a payment, and he had checked the records and seen that the payments had been coming from an LLC he did not recognize, and he had asked his attorney to trace the LLC, and the LLC traced back to me. He told me he had cried when he saw that. He told me he had cried for an hour. He told me he had realized in that hour that everything he had ever resented me for was a story he had told himself. He had resented me for being distant. I had been the one funding his life. He had resented me for being controlling. I had been the one giving him room to fail. He had resented me for not loving him the way his father-in-law loved his wife, with loud declarations and big public gestures. I had loved him the way my own father had never loved me, by paying for things in silence and letting him believe he had earned them. He told me he was not asking for the money back. He was not asking for the house. He was not asking for any of it. He was asking only that when the 2 months were up, I would consider letting him take me to lunch. Not dinner. Not a holiday. Lunch. 1 hour. At a diner of my choosing, he said he understood if the answer was no. He said he understood if the answer was no. He said he understood if the answer was not yet. He said he was prepared to wait however long I needed him to wait, and that he had told his wife that this was not a matter she could help him with. This was a thing he had to repair on his own. I read the letter 3 times. I sat at my kitchen table and I read it, the same table where I had drunk the cold coffee on the Sunday morning 2 months earlier. I read it and I did not cry, because crying is not something I do easily, but I felt for the first time in those 2 months that the cold inside me had begun to loosen at the edges. I did not write back immediately. I waited 2 weeks. I waited until the original 2-month period I had imposed had passed, and a few extra days after that, because I did not want him to think the letter had moved me into agreement before the time was up. The decision had to remain mine. The schedule had to remain mine. That was important. And I think now, looking back, that he understood it was important, because he did not write again during those 2 weeks, and he did not call. When I did write back, I wrote 3 sentences. I wrote, lunch on the 18th, 12:30, the diner on Tunnel Road across from the hardware store. Come alone, bring nothing. He came. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window, in a flannel shirt I had bought him for Christmas in 2022. He stood up when I walked in. He did not try to hug me. He waited for me to sit first. He had ordered a cup of coffee and nothing else. We talked for 1 hour and 12 minutes. I am not going to tell you what we said, because some conversations are not for the telling. I will tell you only that at the end of it, I did not promise him anything. I did not put him back in the will. I did not give him back the house. I did not even tell him I forgave him, because forgiveness is a word I am careful with, and I have learned that saying it before you mean it is the same as lying. What I told him was that we could have lunch again in 3 months, the same diner, the same time, the same conditions, and if those went well, we could have lunch again 3 months after that. That was a 1.5 years ago. We are on lunch number 6 now. They have moved into a slightly larger apartment in the same neighborhood. He still works the second job. He has not asked me for money. He has not asked me for anything. His wife sent me a Christmas card last December, which I kept on the mantel for the appropriate amount of time and then put in a drawer. I have not met her again. I will eventually. I am not in a hurry. I will tell you what I have learned, since I imagine that is what you are waiting for, the way people always wait at the end of a story for the part where the old man tells you the moral. I have learned that love and respect are 2 different currencies, and a man who confuses them will go broke without ever understanding why his pockets are empty. I've learned that the most generous thing a parent can do for an adult child is sometimes to stop being generous, because a child who has been carried his whole life will mistake the carrying for the floor. I've learned that the people who tell you they have always been there for you, in captions or in toasts or in greeting cards, are usually the ones who have been there for the smallest part of the smallest stretch, and that the people who have actually been there are too tired and too quiet to say so. And I've learned, finally, that the cold I felt on that Sunday morning at 6:43 was not cruelty. It was the last thing my late wife ever taught me, even though she had been dead for 7 years when she taught it. She told me once, when our boy was small and had thrown a tantrum over a toy, that you can love a child and still let him fall. You can love a child and still let him learn what the floor feels like. I had forgotten that. I had spent 15 years catching him before he hit the ground, and the catching had taught him only one thing, which was that the ground was not real. It is real now. He knows it is real, and maybe in another year, or 2 or 5, I will be able to look at him across a diner table and not see the photograph anymore, not see the suit, not see the arch of white roses, not see the caption. I am not there yet, but I am closer than I was, and the cup of coffee, the one that went cold on a Sunday morning in October, I poured it out and washed the mug, and I have used that mug every morning since, and it does not feel cold anymore. I've thought a great deal in the months since that lunch on Tunnel Road about why a son who was given everything ended up resenting the man who gave it to him. I do not believe my boy is a bad person. I believe he is an ordinary person, and ordinary people, when they are carried for too long, stop noticing the arms underneath them. The mistake was not his alone. It was mine and his mother's, and the way we built his world without ever letting him build a single load-bearing wall of it himself. Cause and effect is the only honest law I know. A house bought in silence will be received in silence. A loan paid down without telling produces a young man who believes he paid it himself. A father who never demands respect produces a son who never thinks to give it. Every choice I made out of love, every check I wrote without explanation, every comfort I quietly arranged was a brick I laid in the road that ended at that Sunday morning Instagram post. I do not regret loving him that way. I regret only that I never told him what the loving had cost, and so he never learned what it was worth. If there is anything I would pass to a younger man reading this, it is 3 small things, and they are not original to me. They were taught to me late and at considerable expense. The first is character. A man's character is not what he says when he's being watched. It is what he does at 6:43 on a Sunday morning when no one is looking. My boy's character was tested by a wedding caption, and he failed it. And the failure was useful. Because failure is the only honest mirror we have. He knows now what kind of man he was. He is becoming a different one, slowly, on his own time, and that becoming is the only thing in this whole story that is truly his. The second is wisdom. Wisdom is the difference between knowing a thing and having paid for it. I knew intellectually that you can love a child too much. I had to lose the ease of his company for 2 months before I understood it in my bones. There is no shortcut to that kind of knowing. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. The third is the one I value most, and it is the one young people now seem least interested in cultivating, which is the simple capacity to endure a hard thing without flinching. I did not flinch on that Sunday morning. I did not flinch in the law office. I did not flinch when the letter came, and I did not flinch when I poured the cold coffee out of the mug. The flinch is what kills you, not the pain. To flinch is what makes a man trade his self-respect for a moment of relief, and once he has traded it, he will spend the rest of his life trying to buy it back at a price he cannot afford. I am not a wise man. I am only an old one. But these 3 things, character and wisdom, and the steadiness to stand where you are standing, are what I have left, and I am giving them to you because no one gave them to me until it was almost too late.